Today, we're dissecting coding interviews, not the sanitized practice leetcode advice you see everywhere, but the brutal psychological warfare where brilliant engineers fail because they don't understand the performance theater, where knowing the metagame matters more than algorithmic brilliance, and where one missed edge case destroys months of interview preparation. 3 experts who have survived hundreds of interviews, seen talented engineers crash because they optimized for the wrong metrics, and learned that coding interviews are more about psychology and communication than pure problem-solving ability. I'm Sam, and someone just asked me why our best engineer failed their FANG interview, while our mediocre coder got 3 offers.
I've coached over 500 engineers through coding interviews and seen every possible failure mode. The biggest shock for most people is that coding interviews aren't really about coding. They're about demonstrating your problem-solving process, communication skills, and ability to work under pressure. I've watched brilliant algorithm experts fail because they couldn't explain their thinking, and average coders succeed because they nailed the performance aspects.
I conducted over 200 coding interviews at Google and Meta. The dirty secret is that we rarely expect perfect solutions. We're evaluating thought process, code structure, edge case handling, and how you respond to hints. Most candidates optimize for correctness when they should optimize for demonstrating engineering judgment. The best interviews are collaborative problem-solving sessions, not algorithmic recitations.
I've studied coding interview processes across hundreds of companies and thousands of candidates. The pattern is clear. Success correlates more with interview strategy and psychological preparation than pure technical ability. Companies know the process is flawed, but they use it anyway because it's scalable. Understanding the system's dysfunction is key to navigating it successfully.
Dr. Martinez, guide us through this interview nightmare. Maya and David, prepare to expose the gap between what coding interviews claim to measure and what they actually evaluate. No mercy, no, just practice more problems platitudes.
Let's start with the fundamental misconception. What do coding interviews actually measure versus what candidates think they measure?
Candidates think we're measuring algorithmic knowledge and coding speed. What we're actually measuring is structured thinking, communication clarity, code organization, and graceful handling of ambiguity. A candidate who asks clarifying questions, explains their approach, and writes clean code with good variable names will outperform someone who silently produces an optimal algorithm.
The biggest failure mode is the silent genius engineers who are brilliant but don't verbalize their thinking. They'll solve the problem correctly but get rejected because the interviewer couldn't follow their thought process. Coding interviews are performance art, not solo problem solving. You have to be the narrator of your own thinking.
Walk me through the psychology of a coding interview. What's happening in a candidate's mind?
Pure terror usually, the artificial time pressure, the scrutiny, the performance anxiety, it's designed to be stressful. Candidates' fight or flight responses kick in, which destroys higher order thinking. The engineers who succeed have learned to manage this psychological state, not just the technical content. Breathing, positive self-talk, and systematic approaches matter more than algorithm knowledge.
How should candidates approach the initial problem analysis phase?
Start with clarifying questions always. What are the input constraints? What's the expected output format? Are there performance requirements? This shows engineering thinking and often reveals crucial details that change the optimal approach. Then work through examples manually before coding anything. Candidates who jump straight to implementation usually fail.
I teach a systematic framework. Clarify, example, approach, code, test. Spend 20 to 30% of your time on the first 3 steps. Most candidates spend 5% on analysis and 95% on implementation, which leads to wrong approaches and messy code. The analysis phase is where you demonstrate problem-solving skills.
What are the most common pattern recognition mistakes?
Over-optimization and pattern forcing. Candidates see array and immediately think 2 pointers or see tree and force a DFS solution. But the key is matching the right pattern to the specific problem constraints. Sometimes a simple brute force approach is optimal given the input size. Don't use a binary search when a linear scan is clearer and sufficient.
How important is knowing specific algorithms and data structures?
You need to know the fundamentals: arrays, hash maps, trees, graphs, basic sorting, and searching. But memorizing obscure algorithms is less important than understanding when and why to use different approaches. I'd rather see a candidate reason through a problem with basic tools than regurgitate a complex algorithm they don't really understand.
What about the communication strategy during the interview?
Think out loud constantly but strategically. Explain your reasoning, not just your actions. I'm using a hash map here because I need O1 lookup to track visited elements. Acknowledge trade-offs. This approach uses more memory but gives us better time complexity. The interviewer needs to understand your engineering judgment, not just your coding ability.
And respond to hints gracefully. If an interviewer asks, "Are there any edge cases you haven't considered?" Don't get defensive. Say, "Good point, let me think through that," and systematically check your assumptions. Interviewers give hints because they want you to succeed, not because you're failing.
How should candidates structure their code during the interview?
Clean, readable code with good variable names and clear structure. Don't optimize for brevity, optimize for clarity. Use helper functions to break down complex logic. Add comments for non-obvious parts. The code should read like documentation of your thought process. I've seen brilliant algorithms get rejected because the code was unreadable.
What about testing and edge case handling?
Always test your solution with the examples you worked through earlier, plus edge cases, empty inputs, single elements, maximum constraints. Walk through your code line by line with concrete values. Verbalize what you're checking. Let me verify this handles empty arrays correctly. This shows debugging skills and attention to detail.
How do candidates recover when things go wrong during the interview?
Stay calm and be honest about getting stuck. Say, I think I'm going down the wrong path. Let me step back and reconsider the approach. It's much better to restart with a clearer plan than to keep coding a broken solution. Good interviewers respect candidates who can recognize and correct their mistakes.
Ask for help when you need it. I'm having trouble with this part, could you give me a hint? Is perfectly acceptable. We'd rather guide you to a solution than watch you struggle silently. The worst candidates are the ones who get stuck and then shut down completely.
What are the most common time management mistakes?
Spending too much time on optimization before getting a working solution. Get the brute force approach working first, then optimize if there's time. Also, getting stuck on syntax details instead of focusing on the algorithm. If you can't remember the exact syntax for something, just write pseudocode and explain what you're trying to do.
How do you handle the pressure and anxiety?
Practice under realistic conditions. Use a whiteboard or shared screen. Set timers, have someone watch you. Develop pre-interview routines that calm you down. During the interview, slow down your breathing and remind yourself that the interviewer wants you to succeed. Reframe the experience as collaborative problem solving, not a test.
What about the metagame? How do you optimize for the interview process itself?
Understand what each company values. Google focuses on scalability and system design thinking. Amazon emphasizes working backwards from customer needs. Facebook likes clean, efficient code. Tailor your communication style to match their engineering culture. Also, research your interviewer if possible. Their background often influences what they'll focus on.
How should candidates prepare for coding interviews systematically?
Focus on patterns, not problems. Master 15 to 20 core patterns that cover 80% of interview questions. 2 pointers, sliding window, tree traversal, graph search, dynamic programming basics. Practice the communication and process, not just the coding. Do mock interviews with feedback. Quality of practice matters more than quantity.
What about the different interview formats, phone screens, virtual whiteboard?
Each format has different challenges. Phone screens are about clear verbal communication since they can't see you think. Virtual interviews require comfort with screen sharing and online IDEs. Whiteboard interviews test your ability to write clean code without IDE support. Practice in the specific format you'll encounter.
How do you handle follow-up questions and extensions?
Follow-ups are usually about optimization, handling scale, or considering different constraints. Stay flexible and think about how your solution would change if the inputs were much larger, or if you had different memory time constraints. This tests your ability to think about real-world engineering trade-offs.
What are the red flags that interviewers watch for?
Arrogance, inflexibility, and poor communication. Candidates who argue with hints, dismiss edge cases as trivial, or can't explain their code clearly. Also, candidates who memorize solutions without understanding them. This becomes obvious when you ask follow-up questions. We want to work with engineers who are collaborative and can handle feedback.
How do you know if an interview went well?
Good signs: the interviewer was engaged, asked follow-up questions, and the conversation felt collaborative. You demonstrated your thought process clearly, handled hints well, and produced working code even if it wasn't perfect. Bad signs: long silences, the interviewer seemed disengaged, or you couldn't produce any working solution.
So coding interviews aren't about coding at all. They're psychological performance art where communication, process, and metagame awareness matter more than algorithmic brilliance. This is more like improv theater than computer science.
Welcome to the reality of technical hiring. Anyone can learn algorithms, but demonstrating problem-solving process, handling pressure gracefully, and communicating technical thoughts clearly, those are the skills that actually matter for collaborative software development, and they're what interviews really test.
This episode was brought to you by Engineer Panic, where we expose the gap between what systems claim to measure and what they actually evaluate. Because understanding the performance aspects of coding interviews might be more important than your algorithmic knowledge. We're back, let's talk about the advanced strategies for coding interview mastery. Maya, what's the most counterintuitive advice for interview preparation?
Practice failing gracefully more than you practice solving problems perfectly. The situations where you get stuck, make mistakes, or need hints are where interviewers really evaluate your engineering judgment. Learn to handle these moments with professionalism and curiosity rather than panic or defensiveness.
Focus on the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of the interview. How you analyze the problem initially and how you test and explain your solution at the end often determine the outcome more than the algorithm you choose in the middle. Polish these transition moments.
Understand that different interviewers have different styles and biases. Some love optimization discussions, others care about code clarity, others focus on edge cases. Learn to read your interviewer in the first few minutes and adapt your approach accordingly. Flexibility is more valuable than rigid preparation.
What are the biggest red flags in interview preparation?
Grinding problems without understanding patterns, memorizing solutions without learning the underlying principles, practicing alone without getting feedback on your communication and process, and focusing only on getting the right answer instead of demonstrating good engineering practices.
Overpreparing for exotic algorithms while neglecting basic problem-solving communication. Most interview failures happen because of poor process and explanation, not because candidates don't know advanced data structures. Master the fundamentals and the meta skills.
Treating every company and interviewer the same. Each company has different evaluation criteria and cultural values. Research the specific interview process and tailor your preparation accordingly. Generic interview prep leads to generic results.
How do you build genuine confidence for coding interviews?
Master your process, not just problem solutions. When you have a reliable framework for approaching any problem, clarify, example, approach, code, test, you feel confident even with unfamiliar questions. Confidence comes from trusting your systematic approach, not from memorizing answers.
What keeps you up at night about the current state of coding interviews?
The optimization for interview performance over job performance. We're selecting for people who are good at a specific type of performance art, not necessarily the best engineers. But until companies adopt better evaluation methods, candidates have to play the game as it exists.
The inequality in access to interview preparation resources. Candidates from traditional CS backgrounds or with time to prepare extensively have huge advantages. This creates systemic bias in hiring that has nothing to do with engineering ability. The process favors privilege more than skill.
The disconnect between what interviews test and what jobs require. Most software engineering work involves reading existing code, collaborating with teams, and solving ambiguous business problems. Coding interviews test none of these skills effectively, yet we use them to make major career decisions.
How do you maintain perspective during the interview process?
Remember that interview performance doesn't reflect your worth as an engineer. The process is flawed, and sometimes good engineers get rejected for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability. Focus on learning from each interview and improving your process, not on perfect outcomes.
Final advice for engineers facing coding interviews.
Treat interviews as collaborative problem-solving sessions, not adversarial tests. The interviewer wants you to succeed. Focus on demonstrating your engineering process and communication skills, not just your ability to produce correct algorithms. And remember that the goal is finding the right mutual fit, not just getting an offer.
Prepare systematically, but don't over-optimize for any single company or question type. Master the fundamentals, practice your communication, and develop a reliable problem-solving process. The meta skills transfer across all interview styles and will serve you throughout your career.
Understand the system's limitations while playing the game effectively. Coding interviews are an imperfect proxy for engineering ability, but they're the current reality. Learn the performance aspects, but don't let interview optimization compromise your actual engineering development.
This has been Engineer Panic. We've learned that coding interviews are psychological performance art, where process and communication matter more than algorithmic brilliance, that preparation should focus on systematic approaches rather than problem memorization, and that success requires understanding both the technical and metagame aspects. Sweet dreams, and may your next coding interview feel like collaborative problem solving.
Thanks for the deep dive. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to help a brilliant systems engineer understand why getting the optimal solution doesn't matter if you can't explain your thinking process to another human being.
And I need to figure out how to evaluate a candidate's real engineering ability when our interview process only tests their performance skills and pattern recognition under artificial time pressure.
Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep questioning whether our evaluation methods actually measure what matters for successful engineering careers. The future belongs to engineers who can both solve problems and communicate their solutions effectively.
This has been Engineer Panic, where technical skill meets performance psychology. Until next time, remember, your coding interview isn't failing because your algorithm is wrong. It's failing because you're optimizing for the wrong metrics in a broken but unavoidable system.